Welcome back to Forever Everything podcast. I'm your host, Jason Khalipa. On today's episode, we have Dr. Adam Hotchkiss on the show. Now, I was looking forward to this conversation a ton because it bridges the gap between two things I'm really interested in: traditional medicine, this Western medicine, and then also this idea of fitness, lifestyle, health. And I think Dr. Adam does a great job sharing his path to becoming a doctor, his journey to get there, his time working with patients with diabetes, which I found to be particularly interesting. We then go into sick care versus healthcare, what the difference there is. Finally, hormone optimization and blood work evaluation. Dr. Adam works for Merrick Health. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know we've been doing work with Merrick Health for quite a while. I got my blood work there. Our team at NC Fit has got their blood work there, and I think they're doing an incredible job. I wanted to learn more about what in particular should we be looking for when we're looking at our blood work, and what markers, maybe as a really fit person or someone that exercises a lot, maybe the blood work markers are abnormal compared to most, but they actually aren't something that's bad. So we talked today about that. In particular, we finish off with this idea of should you be wearing shoes? So stay tuned for the entire episode. I really enjoyed this one. Dr. Adams is he's a great speaker. He's extremely intelligent, and I hope you get as much out of this episode as I did. Now, before we get into it, I want to remind you about our friends over at Merrick Health, right? Of course. If you want the exact same panel that I got, I imagine you could actually have Dr. Adam even evaluate your blood work as well. Make sure to check out the show notes and utilize the code EOE for 10% off your first blood panel. That's going to be a great way to really look underneath the hood, see what's going on. We talk about that today. I hope you guys get a ton of value out of it. Make sure to check out Merrick Health. Use the code EOE for 10% off. Without any further ado, let's dive into a great episode with Dr. Adam Hotchkiss. Let's go. Dr. Adam Hotchkiss, thank you so much for joining us today. I am super excited to dive into all things your background, hormone optimization, blood work. I actually just sent you like 30 seconds ago my blood work, and thanks for taking the time. How's your? I see you're basically in a gym right now.
Yeah, this is actually the Merrick headquarters. So we've got like all the business stuff on that side, and then in the kind of back of the building, we've got a little squat rack set up, some kettlebells, some dumbbells. So I actually came in last night and I caught like our vice president getting a workout in. So it's definitely like the culture we have here. Like in between patients, we'll be hitting some pull-ups, doing some squats, stuff like that. So yeah, it's awesome.
I love that, man. Yeah, we got to tell whoever was there last that they need to put their weights away because
actually, to be honest, I did that this morning because I set up the camera and I'm like, you can kind of tell the squat rack. Let me throw some plates on there so you know. So
it looked better.
I know no burpee challenge repercussions for me. I'll take care of it.
So I wanted to start here. I was looking up on Merrick Health, which I got connected to you through Steven, who works with Merrick Health, who I've had my blood work done through Merrick Health. And I was on your guys' website in terms of meeting the team. And I saw at the end of your name, it's, doctor, and then it's DPM. And then if I switch over to this gentleman, Dr. Stephen Campbell, his is MD. And so I thought a good place to start with this conversation, because frankly, I don't know the difference, is the difference between DPM and then MD, because both of them have doctor in the front. But I was just curious to kind of lay the framework of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's something that isn't, not a lot of people really understand the differentiation. So there's quite a few different paths that one can take when becoming a doctor. And I don't want to say like medical doctor because that's confusing. That's more of like the MD. We all practice medicine, but they specifically call themselves medical doctors. So there's MD, which is a medical doctor. There's DO, which is a doctor of osteopathic medicine. And then there's a doctor of podiatric medicine. And that's what I am. So that means that basically we practice solely on the lower extremity, usually from like the knee down, so the foot and ankle. And we, at this point in time, we basically take like all of our classes alongside either MDs or DOs. We're very equal in our schooling. We have a lot of the similar classes, similar boards and stuff like that. We just specialize from day one in foot and ankle pathology. So it is interesting. It's something that has kind of just passed down due to politics and different governing boards. For example, like MD and DO, in my opinion, they're the exact same degree. They do all the same stuff. They're equally as good. but it's just that one, they have different degrees. So we do specialize in foot and ankle, and you may be wondering like why I'm, part of this clinic, Merrick, how did I get into hormone optimization and things like that? And I mean, I can dive into that at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want now, I
No,
certainly.
for sure. I mean, well, how do you go from being a doctor who's focusing mainly on the lower extremity, and how does that carry over to blood work? Because I mean, I imagine you need to know blood work, right? That's kind of like common in medicine. And then you so whether you're an MD or you're focused on the lower extremity, are you taking similar classes in terms of like the heart, the lungs, the blood work, those systems? I imagine they're similar, right?
Yeah, and that's something I would definitely like. A lot of people sometimes think like, well, all you learn about is the foot. Well, actually, we didn't really even learn about the foot until our third or fourth year of school. Like I was sitting right alongside those MDs and DOs, and we were doing, kidney medicine and liver and lungs and brain. We were learning all this stuff. We're learning because, it all connects. The things that we do, for example, a lot of what we do is like diabetic wound care. We obviously need to understand diabetes, which is going to impact the whole rest of the body, So it wouldn't really make sense to just understand the foot and not understand the rest of the body that it's connected to. So kind of my story and how I got into like the lab work and the optimization stuff actually came through just being a podiatrist, and it actually kind of in my residency. So I did a residency in foot and ankle surgery with like interest in barefoot reconstructive surgery. So while I was doing that, we would get a lot of patients in, like I said, that have diabetes, that have these wounds caused by diabetes, because long story short, basically what happens is they lose sensation of their foot, and they very easily, get these ulcers and things. So, if we have a tight pair of shoes and we're rubbing a blister, we know, and we put a Band-Aid on it or we change shoes. They don't know because they can't feel it. So they'll walk around and wear a hole into their foot. It'll get infected. So that's why you see a lot of patients with diabetes having these ulcers and losing toes, feet, things like that. But I would see these guys coming in over and over again. Oh, I'm sorry.
Question for you on that. Like, so why is it that diabetes attacks the lower extremities like that? What in particular causes that inflammation? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, so it's a large cascade of a lot of different metabolic processes, but the main kind of driving thing that I was just speaking to was we get something called neuropathy, which is basically when the nerves are exposed to a high volume of sugar. This is a very simplistic way of saying it, but we can just kind of imagine that the nerves are going to be like crystallized and damaged, just like rock candy that kids have, where the sugar kind of crystallizes around the string. Very similar. Sugar does the same type of stuff to our internal organs, to our nerves, to our arteries. So their nerves get damaged and they lose the sensation. And that's where, we just talk about like they get wounds, but there's also issues with the blood vessels. So the same type of thing is going to happen to the blood vessels, causing there to not be good blood flow down there. So that adds another issue. So that's going to, nutrients and things can't make it down there to heal. Also, it's going to infect the way that their skin quality is, kind of breaking that down. So a lot of times people with diabetes will have very dry, thick skin. And so it's just this whole host of issues that are causing the terrible environment for things like ulcers. And, you're walking around on these feet every single day. They're taking a beating, and it shows, unfortunately.
And so you start your you said your residency was in surgery, but backing up a little bit. So you and I actually almost 10 years ago, you sent me a picture. Almost 10 years ago, you and I met at a CrossFit regionals event. So obviously you've been in the functional training, CrossFit, powerlifting, bodybuilding space for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so did you know that you wanted to get into like being a doctor early on? And then I guess, are you one of those unique people that I love where you basically see the value of like nutrition and fitness, but you also wanted to get like the medical side and help bridge that gap? Is that kind of how you got started in medicine? I mean, kind of going back in time, and then obviously I want to go back into diabetes and things like that, because I find a lot of interest in it, but kind of going back, how did you get interested in medicine? And then what role did functional training, CrossFit, powerlifting play in that whole like kind of journey,
Yeah, I mean, it played a huge one. And I have to say, like, fitness saved my life, and it literally did. It literally changed the entire trajectory of my life. So back to your question, is if I always wanted to be a doctor and wanted to get into medicine, like, no, absolutely not. To be honest, I hardly passed high school. And not because it was a real struggle for me. I just had no drive. I was kind of a little skate punk. Like I was skateboarding around, like had no worries. And, I graduated just barely. My parents had made me enroll in a local community college, basically telling me like, you're going to go to college or we're kicking you out. And so I enrolled and I got my classes. I never went to any of them. So I failed like my first semester, like a ridiculous amount of units because, I didn't really realize that if you don't show up, they're not going to kick you out themselves. They just leave you on and throw you an F. And so it wasn't until years later, until I was about 20, I think, that I had some other stuff going on. I just kept messing around. I was kind of messing around with drugs. Like, wasn't really drugs. Like in this day and age, it's not even a big thing. I was just, getting high, smoking weed and stuff like that. I never got into hard drugs, but for me, it's, felt like I was just going down the wrong path, drinking, hanging out with friends, not doing anything. I just had this like epiphany, like I am not doing anything with my life. I need to change something. So I kind of like one day I cut my hair. I had long hair. I threw away all those ratty clothes and everything. I changed everything about me literally in one day. I enrolled in college again. I got a gym membership, and the gym membership was really what changed a lot for me. So I started getting obsessed with working out. I'm kind of one of those people that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to give it 110%. And so I did. Like I would go home, I'd be reading about the physiology and the biochemistry of working out, trying to really dial into it. I was like, I really love this stuff. I have a true passion for it. And so I went to a personal training course, and that was fun. I started doing some personal training, and it wasn't enough for me. So I started taking courses. Like I took physiology and aced it and loved it. And then anatomy, biochemistry and chemistry. And I was just like really getting into the science of it. Was able to transfer outside the community college into a university. I went to Sonoma State University in California, out where you are.
Yeah. Shout out to Sonoma State.
Yeah. And it was at that time too, I was thinking, well, maybe I can do something in medicine because I really love the science stuff. But I thought that, I don't have the pedigree to be a doctor, because I thought this way, and some people might, that, you basically have to be born where you're going on yachts with your parents and you're going to Harvard and Yale and Stanford and things. And, I just wasn't that kid. And I'm like, I could never be a doctor. Maybe I could be a nurse. And then I would set my goals a little higher. Maybe I could be a physician assistant. And so I went and I was volunteering for a doctor, just shadowing, and he kind of saw my work ethic and talked to me. He's like, why do you want to be a physician assistant? Not that there's anything wrong with them, but why are you aiming so low? Like, I see a lot of potential in you. And, I kind of told him like, well, I wasn't raised that way. I don't really have that pedigree. I'm not that person to be a doctor. He let me know like, hey man, I was a surfer until I was 30. I went to a community college, and then I got into all these medical schools, and it was, it basically telling me there's alternate routes. Gave me a lot of encouragement. So from there on, I kind of decided I knew that I wanted to get into medicine. At that point, this kind of dives into the why podiatry is. I really liked dermatology. That's what this doctor was, who I was shadowing. So I liked issues with like the skin. It was just a lot of fun. It was a little bit of mix of surgery with a lot of clinic exposure. So you were seeing patients one-on-one. I also really liked orthopedic surgery, so working on bones. Two very different things. And if you go the traditional MD or DO route, you have to decide when you graduate, am I going to go into dermatology or orthopedics? Not only do you have to decide, but you have to match into those, which is very hard. It's an extremely competitive field where you have to just be acing every exam and really show up during medical school in order to match into one of those programs to be in either orthopedist or a dermatologist. Until one day we brought a podiatrist into the dermatology practice to help with a nail procedure, because podiatrists do a lot of nail procedures. Got to talking to him, and he's telling me about the bone surgery that he did before coming in. He did like this ankle fracture. So I'm like, whoa, that's like orthopedics. And then he's helping us with this dermatologic process. And I'm like, there's the two things that I love put together. I didn't even know podiatry was a separate field. Most people don't. They all just kind of consider us to be doctors. But it was at that point I decided, well, that's the thing for me. I'm going to go into that. But then eventually that changed too. And that's why I'm here, which we can get into later.
So how old were you when it's funny, a really close friend of mine, he, graduated from school, whatever. And then boom, he's like, you know what? I want to be a doctor. And so he's actually an emergency medicine doctor. But he got into it when he was like, I want to say he was probably, I don't know, late 20s, maybe even early, like maybe late 20s, maybe even close to 30 before he really he had to go back to school and go take all the classes again because he had gotten a degree in something else. Like,
Yeah.
when did you make that switch? Was it like in your late 20s or
So
mid 20s actually?
yeah, it was about 20, I think, when I kind of cleaned up. And it was from that day that I was like, I'm going to do everything right. So I started acing all my classes at the community college. And I was pretty much set on the path then. I did always feel like I was kind of behind everybody else because even it was only 2 years, but it felt like a lifetime. When you're younger, just being 2 years behind everybody seems like it's insane. I'm never going to be a doctor, but I'm like, I need to, put the pedal to the metal. So I was taking summer courses, winter courses. My semesters were jam packed where I was trying to dig myself out of the hole too. Because remember, I was coming in with like a 0 GPA because I'd failed all these classes. I had to remake up those. So yeah, it was about 20, but I definitely came in with that mindset of like, basically whenever I put my mind to something, I know like if I give this my all, good things are going to come. I was never the smartest, like never the strongest, things like that. But as your, the title of the podcast, like effort, it was really like grind. And if you keep working day after day, showing up, giving it your all, good things are going to come,
Yeah. You and I have, similar but different stories. Like I was similar in high school, right? I was, popular guy, partied a lot, wasn't really applying myself much, got out, and then I went to a junior college. Same idea. And my kind of wake up thing was like, I realized at that moment, actually similar to you, was like, no one was there to kind of like chaperone me through the process. It's like, hey man, like gone are the days where your teacher's calling your mom to say, hey, because high school is kind of designed to progress you through, right? Junior college is like, hey man, you could be here for a year, you could be here for 10 years. We don't really give a shit. Like you got to apply yourself. So anyway, similar background in that sense. So kind of pivoting a little bit, you thought this was like the vision for what you want to do, which I find that to be super rewarding that you have these opportunities, right? And I think like nurse practitioners, nurses, physician's assistant, they're all like amazing people. And, we've spent some time in the hospital because my daughter was sick, and each one of them plays such a critical role in the success of the patient.
100%. Yeah. I often tell people too, like, when I'm doing surgery, like the janitor has as big of a role as I do because they came in and cleaned the room and sterilized the room. Like I couldn't have done surgery unless that happened, like that. We are a team. And that's what I really like about Merrick too, which we'll get into, is we have so many different people on the team and none of us are kind of like above the other. That's one thing in medicine I kind of dislike, like doctors looking down on NPs or nurses and things. Like we're not superior. We're just another part of the team, Side tangent, but I just thought I'd get that out there. Shout out to all the NPs and PAs and nurses and MAs and all that stuff. We're all in it together.
Yeah, no, I'm not on your side, but as a patient side, like I agree with you. You got to work it all together. And so, as you're pursuing your career, what made you, because again, you're bridging the gap between like someone who's just pushing pills to, say, hey, this person has diabetes. Well, you deal with a lot of people who have diabetes, and there's probably quite a few people that you've dealt with that lifestyle choices were probably an incredible reason why they had that impact. Is that what kind of pushed you into kind of like this idea of Merrick, or am I off base there?
No, yeah, 100%. So I think back to like one example in particular. All through school and everything, we were dealing with all kinds of diabetes, a lot of wound care. So like the wounds that we see, they're the things that will make people's stomach turn. Like literally people come in with maggots, like eating down to the bone in their foot. And this is a routine thing for a podiatrist to see every single. Yeah, really.
It's not so
it's crazy. It is 100% happens. So like in residency, then you as just a student, you're seeing it all, you're a part of it. But as a resident, you kind of, as you progress, you start taking on patients of your own. I remember a patient got sent to us and he had just been diagnosed with pre-diabetes. And I'm like really excited about this. Like I'm going to make an impact in this dude's life. Like a lot of times I'm seeing them when, the bone's exposed and then it's too late. You can't reverse like that neuropathy at that point, but I'm seeing this guy and I'm like, this is awesome. So I give him the spiel. Like, this is reversible. This is not a diagnosis that you have to live by. Like I like to tell people, you are not diabetic. You're a person with diabetes. And you can soon be a person that no longer has diabetes, I think, for like Greg Glassman, I think for a while ran that campaign of like, we cure diabetes. he wasn't wrong. Exercise and lifestyle and stuff can cure diabetes. It's a preventable and reversible disease. So I'm talking to this guy like, hey, you've been diagnosed with this pre-diabetes, but good news, like we can change this around, just do these things with your diet and your lifestyle, everything. And then I don't see him again for, I think it was like 6 months or so. And he comes in and he has full-blown diabetes and he has a wound on his foot. And, and I'm like, damn, this sucks. Like we're failing this guy because, I'm only getting to see him for like 5 minutes really quick. In my residency, we had like 100 patients coming through the clinic and we would just do quick foot exams. And, I told him like, I'm hoping that I made some impact, but I didn't. And, I'm just like, this sucks. And the primary care isn't doing much for him. They're just basically, giving metformin, insulin, all these things, these diabetic drugs, but not really getting down to the actual, issues. So it was at that point that I kind of was like, this really sucks. I hate the fact that I'm doing like reactive medicine and not preventative medicine. And that's just not me, because I'm all about optimization and everything. That's why I got into this, because I love the science and I love health. And this is not health. It's like, it's sick care. It's not health care, which is unfortunate.
Man. Yeah. You're the second person I've heard talk about this idea of like sick care versus health care. And it makes, I've heard that term before. I think it makes total sense. Now, you're talking about did people come into you, most people were type 2 diabetic or right. And so in that particular case, like you said, you just saw it time after time. I mean, this guy had an opportunity to like make a change and it actually would have helped him, then boom. And so when you talk about sick care versus healthcare, I imagine you're trying to be more proactive instead of reactive is the biggest differentiator there. And
absolutely,
lifestyle is the number one factor.
It's huge. Yeah, 100%. So like we talked about this type 2 diabetes, and not to be mistaken with type 1, which is genetic, and they had nothing to do with it. Their pancreas has just failed them, unfortunately. But with type 2, it was literally, it's an accumulation of the lifestyle of being inactive and consuming too much food. And very easy to do in today's day and age. And we just don't have the infrastructure set up to basically tell people what they need to live a healthy life. In fact, it's what a part of that I love about Merrick is that half the labs and stuff that might tell these people that they're trending towards a path of being in bad water, we don't even allow them to get. For example, the A1C, the hemoglobin A1C, it's a measurement of basically how much blood sugar your red blood cells have been exposed to for the past 3 months. So it's a way that we look to see, if you're trending towards diabetes or something. Insurance companies won't even cover that to tell people that they might have pre-diabetes or are diabetic. It's very hard for patients to even know if they have these issues, because something like feeling high blood pressure or sugar, you don't really feel that. Same with blood pressure, though. You don't feel these things. It's not like a trauma. It's not like they feel any of these processes going on in their body. So it's totally understandable that they don't make lifestyle changes. They're told you got diabetes. They're thinking, well, I can't really feel it. I feel fine. This is my normal. I'll just continue eating. It sucks.
Oh. And so the insurance, and the insurance companies have to. So you're saying like this A1. So I took that. Now, when I got my blood work done with you guys, I had just started. I was probably a couple weeks in on just a meat and fruit diet, if I'm not mistaken. I think I was a couple weeks in when I took this blood work. I need to do it again. But what you're saying is that this particular what do you refer marker, right?
Yeah, marker.
That the insurance companies won't cover it. So I imagine most people just won't even ever get it. Is there other? I mean, is that the number one indicator of kind of like pre-diabetic? Is that A1C? Is that it?
Yeah, that's one. There's that, and then there's also your fasting glucose. So there's a few measurements that doctors can use to actually give you a diagnosis of diabetes. But that's a great marker because other things can impact the fasting glucose. We never know if maybe a patient threw some creamer in their coffee in the morning or something, and we're getting a reading that's not quite correct. But you can't really lie about the A1C because it is a measurement of, you can think of it as the sugar has basically stained the blood cells, and we're looking to see how much of a market's left on it for a 3-month period. So that's why it's kind of nice about that. And it's not all insurance companies, but it is, some won't cover that. And it's just, half the labs that we order here at Merrick. The sad thing is like, I'll see these patients and they'll go to their primary care and be like, I ran these labs with my doc and I would say 95% of the time they say that their doctor said, like, who the hell's ordering these labs? These are crazy. Why would you want to look this? Why are you looking into this stuff? Like, you don't need this stuff. And it's because they're just used to practicing this reactive type medicine and not preventative.
So what have you seen? So I do want to talk about how you got into Merrick, but what have you seen at a high level? Because medicine evolves, right? I mean, medicine 100 years ago is a lot different than it is today. And I imagine like some of these doctors that were in school 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I mean, technology has improved, markers have improved, but is there just a lack of just awareness on the usefulness of some of these tests? I mean, or how much of it is kind of like, I mean, because I hate to use the word like the system's broken, right? I imagine most of these guys want to help their patients out.
Yeah.
They just might not be aware of some of these tools. Um, I don't know exactly how to frame the question, but it's just like, anyways, this science, because I'm looking at, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's hard for me because, I love medicine and I love my colleagues and stuff. And I do feel like most people are in it for the right reasons. We're just not truly given the tools. A lot of the times we're governed by the insurance companies. So even if a doc wants to order these extensive lab panels, who's going to pay for it? They're usually the insurance companies aren't going to cover it. They're going to get charged out the ass for this stuff, or any of these preventive medications stuff they won't cover. So the doctor is really limited by the insurance companies or the institution that they work for. So if they're in like a hospital group and the hospital group doesn't agree with ordering, these tests that they don't deem necessary, they can't do it, And so another thing too is we just don't really learn how to, people don't learn how to optimize. We, as doctors, don't learn how to optimize. We learn how to fix what's broken, not make what's good better, So it's hard. There's few markers that we order on Merrick that I'm sure that if you bring to your doc, they'll probably need to look up. Because full disclosure, I did too. I'm like, what is this? This is cool. Things like, for example, the cystatin C, which is a marker of your kidney health, which is great because I actually got the chance to look at your labs, Jason. And if you look, you'll see that you have some elevated kidney markers. So a normal doc may look at that and kind of give you an eye, like you got something going on with your kidneys. Well, no, you don't. You are an athlete with a ton of muscle mass. You may be taking creatine. You probably just worked out and put some stress on the system. And so we know that like athletes are going to have elevated kidney markers. So we look at this thing called the cystatin C to actually look for our athletes to see the true health of the kidneys. And that's how we can tell, So it's small things like that is like most docs don't even work with a population like yourself. You probably don't need to go to the doctor very often because you're probably pretty healthy. They don't see many people like you. Like I said, we see them when, the bones are exposed in the foot.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Merrick. So, we got connected to Merrick. I went and got my blood work done. It was an extensive panel. It's the first time that I can remember in a long time that I've had this extensive. And I actually looked up my hemoglobin A1C. And I don't mind, by the way, sharing any of my blood work numbers because, frankly, there's nothing for me to hide. And I'm looking at my numbers. It says 5.3. It looks like pre-diabetic is significantly higher than that. But that's the number that people could potentially be getting to see if they're in that range. So that's interesting. 5.3. Now talk to me about Merrick Health. So you were a practicing doctor and then found Merrick, or did you actually finish your residency, get done, and then go directly into Merrick Health? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was only practicing for a short amount of time before one of the owners of Merrick reached out to me. He just kind of seen me, I believe, on like social media and was like, hey, you seem to, the things you're posting and stuff seem to kind of resonate with what our mission is here. To kind of go back on that too, to kind of talk about like my history with like hormones and things like that, because it is very strange for a foot doctor to be in a field like this. The full disclosure, again, I was an athlete. I was somebody who was very interested in optimizing and performance enhancing. And I had dabbled with performance enhancing substances myself and got, went to basically PubMed University on this stuff because you weren't learning this. So I was just obsessed with basically learning the literature on performance enhancing, the testosterones, the synthetic performance enhancing drugs, growth hormone, all of that. So, I had fully submerged myself into that for my own personal use and my close friends and things. And then also in my practice, actually one of these wounds I'm talking about, we have various treatments for them. One patient in particular where this first kind of started for me, had this wound that just wasn't healing, like what we call a recalcitrant wound, that just like we're throwing everything at it. We've done surgery, we've done grafts, we've built them special shoes. Nothing's healing this wound. Well, I see this paper that was published. The person's name was Kalchenko in 2009. The study came out of Russia, where they found that hypogonadal men, so men with low testosterone, with diabetic foot ulcers, responded really well when they normalized their testosterone levels. So when they gave them TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy, they found a reduction in inflammation markers, improvements in all the diabetic markers, improvements in blood flow to the wound, and they were able to heal wounds this way. So I'm like, this is awesome. I reach out to this patient's endocrinologist, who should be dealing with their hormones, and I let him know, like, hey, I've tried all this stuff on him. This patient, I got his testosterone tested. He's basically in female levels. You know, he should have a much higher elevated than he does. And the endocrinologist was just like, yeah, no, we're like, I don't do testosterone replacement. No need for that. That's like crazy that you're even thinking of that. You know, it kind of just shot me down. Like, okay. So I call his primary care. Same thing basically, but he was a little bit more open-minded. Like, hey, I'm not comfortable really with hormone replacement therapy. It sounds like you got a pretty good gist of this stuff. He was like, I'll continue to medically manage this person if you want to initiate that treatment. And then part of my license does say that I can treat all systemic disease as related to the foot and ankle. So I can treat to prevent and I can prevent and treat any systemic disease that pertains to the foot and ankle. And so it fell within my scope to, you know, prescribe this guy some testosterone, and with the help of his medical doctor, we started him on this treatment. And 4 months later, the wound was healed. Like, no joke, it was pretty awesome. And so I started continuing to kind of do this. I would throw these labs in every now and then on my patients with these foot ulcers or diabetic issues. And I kept seeing this trend of hypogonadism, which is just the medical term for low testosterone. And it was, you know, I'd call their doc, make sure that their MD was on board with it, because it is, you know, as we talked about, medicine's a team. And I don't want to, you know, I don't have the same exact training as a lot of these guys with their primary care and their internists and their urologists and endocrinologists and stuff. They're the specialists in that. I'm the foot specialist. So we'd work together. But I was healing a lot of people this way. So then, you know, fast forward to talking to Merrick, you know, I'm like, yeah, I do actually have a lot of background in this space, not only from personal use, which was what they were really excited about, because we have a big culture here and we're all about culture on, you know, can you help our patients who basically, you know, the medical system might judge them, you know, if they come in saying like, hey, I'm prepping for a bodybuilding show and I'm using illegal steroids. Can you help me to be healthier? Where their doc would maybe be, you know, a little judgmental. We're the kind of people who will accept them. So they were looking more for that. I'm like, yeah. And you know, I do have history with this stuff too. So yeah, that's kind of where I started with Merrick.
Dude, that's crazy about the testosterone increase off a Russian study that you then brought back. And that's, anyways, kudos to you, man, because I think that, like I said, technology changes all the time. And I want to talk about hormone replacement and what that actually means, because there's synthetic components and then there's natural. So the way I see it, and I could be totally off base, is that you have like these synthetic steroids that are not normally found in your body that you're then putting into your body, which produce XYZ. These are like typically when people think about steroids, I think that's what they're kind of thinking of, right? Really, really big. Then you have these normal hormones in your body, like testosterone and other things, that basically it's hormone replacement, where you could take naturally producing hormone in your body and basically give you more. Did I summarize that right? Or am I tripping?
Yeah, no, pretty well. So yeah, basically, you know, testosterone is kind of the main hormone for a man. It's what gives us our sexual characteristics. You know, it helps with building muscle, you know, mood enhancement, the hair that we have, things like that. Women do have testosterone too, but to a lesser degree. But that's, you know, in a nutshell, in a very like layman's term, like testosterone is what makes a man a man. And so, yeah, when you're doing actual TRT, which is testosterone replacement therapy, you're not loading these people up so that they're going to get on the Olympia stage, you know, and be completely, you know, roided out, as people say. We're just literally replacing a deficiency. So the same as you would like vitamin D. For example, vitamin D is actually a hormone as well. And so when you have low vitamin D, you take more of it. It's the exact same idea with testosterone. You have low testosterone, we give you more. We're not trying to get you into what we would call super physiologic states. We're trying to get you into a normal physiologic state. And so that could mean for a guy who's maybe in their 40s and their testosterone starting to lower, things are starting to slow down for them. They're not recovering as well. They're putting on body fat. They don't have good libido really anymore. We're just literally kind of trying to get them back to where they felt in their 20s and 30s. We're just replacing what they once had. Exactly the same as any other nutrient or something that you would replace.
Huh. And so aside from testosterone, is there other hormones that, or is that like the baseline one that you've seen? So in general, when you look at people's blood work, and you've probably looked at thousands of people's blood work, would you say that for men in particular, that would be like one of the biggest hormones that could be adjusted to make a biggest impact on their health, or is there something else we should be considering?
Yeah, no, I mean, it could be. One thing that I would love to stress about like what we do here at Merrick is I don't want to come across as like a TRT clinic, as a testosterone replacement clinic. Like we do testosterone, but our main mission is human optimization. And so that literally means everything. Sometimes we're just recommending taking some vitamins if that's all you need to optimize yourself. Sometimes we're recommending getting out and getting some sunlight or sleep. Like testosterone is one of the many treatments that we may offer. So we're getting, as you saw, we get the lab panel. It's a massive lab panel, and we look at every single marker. We're not just scrolling straight to testosterone. That's just one of, I don't know, on yours, there's probably 25, 30 different markers on there. Testosterone is a small one. So as far as hormones go, it's one of the big ones. We're also looking at other hormones, things like DHEA, pregnenolone, estrogen, which is also important for men. So we're looking at a host of things.
And when someone's evaluating themselves, like based off, because like you can't just go get blood work tomorrow. You can, but not many people do it. Is there any, so aside from like living a healthy lifestyle based on what you're seeing, like exercising regularly, eating better, what signs would they say that they need to go get blood work done? Or how often would you recommend somebody getting blood work done? Because it does take some effort, right?
Right. So in my opinion, the effort part is pretty low. Like it takes driving to the lab and putting your arm out. Though the financial burden is something I certainly understand for people. Before even getting in with Merrick, I would make it a point to get my own labs drawn like every 6 months. And I do have, looking right here on my desktop, I have a folder called Personal Labs, and it goes back to like 2015. I get them every 6 months and look. So that's ideal. Obviously, again, as I said, unfortunately, some people don't have the financial means. So if you could even do it every year or every 2 years, what's really nice, whether you have symptoms or not, is that you can, see trends. I like, for example, you told me that you were eating meat and fruit only. Super interesting to be able to see how your lab work correlated with that diet. And then you can maybe next time you're eating like a really low fat, high carbohydrate diet, see what your labs look like then. Maybe you've been busting your ass at work and only sleeping a few hours a night. See how that impacted you. I like it for data points. So if you have the financial means, there's, in my opinion, what's better to invest in rather than your health, having a ton of money in the future, if we're not able to use it because we're bedridden, is going to be terrible. And I'm all about the data points. Like right now I'm wearing the continuous.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just really super interesting to have another data point. I just saw a post on Instagram too, where a doctor was like, people who don't have diabetes have no right wearing one of these. It's just stupid. Why would you do that? Like, why are we telling people that they shouldn't get a look at their labs? It's crazy to me.
It's funny. I wore a CGM for a couple months, right? Like I think I wore it for like 60 days, and I found to be super fascinating. So not to pivot this conversation, but I think this is really fascinating to me. What have you noticed? So I obviously you could look at your fasting blood sugar, right? Or fasted, like kind of like right when you wake up, blood sugar. But then you could see the peaks and valleys based off what you eat. But for me, it was even more based off my exercise.
Yeah.
Are you seeing something similar? And then I have a layering question for that. What are you seeing with your CGM? Because I wore mine for over a month, and I found it to be pretty cool.
So some like first night, the coolest thing I saw is that I have something called the dawn phenomenon, which is your blood sugar spikes on its own, basically right before waking up. pretty interesting, like stuff like that. I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff. So I'm like, that's so cool, and I'm thinking of the physiology, like, yeah, my cortisol raised, which caused my body temperature to raise, which tells me to wake up, but it's also telling my liver to produce more glucose so that I can keep the day going, So that was cool. That was one of the fun things. Then, yeah, with exercise, you'll likely see a pretty high spike in glucose too, because your insulin goes down. You need more glucose to get through the workout. The more intense of a workout, usually glucose goes even higher during the workout and then falls off pretty low afterwards too. Is that something similar to what you saw?
Yeah, so just to kind of lay some framework, what a CGM is a continuous glucose monitor. And typically, I wore mine with a patch on top of it on my stomach. Now, Adam is wearing it on his like tricep. I wore it on my stomach in particular because of the jiu-jitsu that I do. And I figured it would be less of a place that would be impacted by someone's grabbing. Now, what I noticed is, because of the time that I was wearing it, my nutrition was like really on point. I didn't see too many peaks and valleys with food consumption much. I did at one point I was off my diet and I drank 2 old fashions and I saw it spike like no other.
Yeah.
But what I saw, and this is like at a high level, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was in the 200s, if not like 220. So if I was doing like a high intensity workout at our gym, I would get to like 150, 180 at blood sugar, which I don't even know exactly what does that even mean. It's milligrams,
Yeah, so that's just the amount basically it's the amount of sugar that's in your blood. So like milligrams per deciliter or something, it's the actual like the solid glucose within the fluid. So it's saying for X amount of fluid, you have X amount of solid glucose.
And so I spiked up to like 180 or whatever doing workouts at our gym, and then go back down to like, I don't know, 90 or 100 or whatever it is. But then when I did things like jujitsu, I found my spike like unbelievably high when I had like this fight or flight mode, or when I was in like a very high stress situation. So for me, with a high intensity workout versus like a high intensity in jiu-jitsu, I saw a massive difference. Did you see any difference between when you connected your brain with your body more versus like, did you see that carry over or no?
Yeah, so I haven't been in any situation like that, though I would suspect like, you're basically getting into a fight if you're like doing jiu-jitsu, you're like you said, fight or flight, you literally are. So you're throwing in that sympathetic nervous system. I could imagine that, cortisol and things are raising. Also the energy demand is raising. So you're already getting that spike of glucose just from the exercise. And then you're getting that sympathetic drive from your nervous system and all the mental stuff going on. It makes sense.
And then it dropped off dramatically. And so that's what you're looking for in a CGM, right? You're looking for, you're looking to be at like this level state. And then you start exercising, and what happens when you start exercising, and why does your blood sugar spike? And then how quickly do you want to see it drop off?
Yeah, so that's all going to depend. And really it's interesting. So basically what's happening when you're working out is the insulin is basically inhibited, which is kind of a paradox. You might think that we need to shuttle insulin in, but it doesn't, so that other things like the liver can produce more glucose for us. And so blood glucose does go up because it is going to be needed to recover from our workout. And then afterwards, the insulin does spike in order to shuttle all that glucose into the muscle that we just used. And that's why we see it drop down. So insulin, you can think of as the kind of the transport system of glucose into the muscle. So during the workout, your body's, filling up with a lot of glucose so that it can be readily used. And then afterwards, it needs to dispose of that. So the insulin kicks on and you shuttle it all in. The same as like where bodybuilders exogenously use, insulin after workouts to kind of mimic that, but at a higher degree. So they'll do a really intense workout, and then they'll do some insulin, drink some carbohydrates, so that it all gets shuttled into the muscle right away and helps to repair and build that up.
They'll actually take insulin and carbohydrates. So you hear about this post-workout, kind of like, is it time to have carbs? That helps basically funnel nutrients into the muscle. And the insulin, they're actually like shooting themselves the insulin to support that?
Yeah, it's pretty common practice in bodybuilding for people to use exogenous insulin. There's a few different ways. You can use slow acting insulin where you just like do one shot a day and it's in the background, and that just basically helps with their massive intake of food. They need some help shuttling that in, because these guys are eating, you know, upwards of like 7,000 calories some days, which is just insane. You know, it's a lot of food that needs to be shuttled in. So it actually is probably a healthy practice to take some burden off their pancreas when they're doing that. Other guys use the more fast acting, where they just crush a workout and they shoot some insulin, and then they eat the carbs and protein for that acute kind of effect. So yeah, it is a practice pretty common in the bodybuilding world.
Dude, I mean, you just seem like you've really, like for lack of a term, like nerded out on like the body and how it functions. So you were in bodybuilding. What did you see the transition between? So you're into CrossFit, you're into bodybuilding, you're into powerlifting. Were you like deep into each one of those at different times, or you kind of like across the board?
No, I get, like I kind of said, I kind of dive in and go like, you know, 110%. Yeah, it's interesting because too, another part that I kind of forgot to bring up when I said like fitness saved my life, like it did. So I had, growing up, just strangely, don't even know what caused it, but like through high school and after, I had a pretty strong eating disorder, which I didn't even truly really realize for a while until it became like really kind of apparent. And, you know, obviously when I'm like gagging myself to throw out my meal, I'm like, okay, there's something wrong here. Working out really kind of cured that for me, because suddenly I was no longer concerned with not getting nutrients in my body. I was concerned with eating as much as I possibly could to facilitate the workouts I was doing. So I kind of started as like most guys probably do, you know, doing curls and chest press and things in the gym. And, you know, I started in the quote unquote bodybuilding, but it was more just like the bros at the gym. I started there. But that kind of eating disorder thing was still kind of nagging. I didn't really like the fact that I was obsessing over my body all the time, always, you know, checking my abs in the mirror, making sure I wasn't getting fat. It was at that point, like I think around maybe 2008, I found CrossFit. There's this like trainer in the gym was like, dude, you got to check out this. This guy's like super jacked too. I'm like, I don't want to look like this guy, so I'm gonna listen to what he says. But he's like, I do these workouts. They just post them on this page every day. It's called a WOD, and they tell you the workout, and that's all I've been doing. I'm like, cool. Funny, because I came from a really small town up in Northern California, and when I'd moved to Sonoma for college, I saw Planet Fitness, and we didn't have like big gyms. We had like a gym that looked like it was out of the 70s. So I see Planet Fitness and like, cool, this is like a nice gym, you know, and I'm going to go do CrossFit there, which is probably funny to your listeners trying to do CrossFit at Planet Fitness.
Oh
but
my God.
my
They were
buddy,
probably yelling at you like, yeah.
yeah, we were learning cleans on the preset bars, you know, with like
Oh yeah.
angled ones and stuff. We were doing deadlifts on the Smith machine. We were trying to do burpees over the benches and stuff until that, you know, eventually they were like, I don't think this is a gym for you. You know, you got to leave. We're not going to let you do this. So yeah, I got really into CrossFit for a while, but that helps my body image so much because, you know, as you know, most gyms don't even have mirrors in them. It became way more focused on performance for me, which was awesome. Like I loved the fact that I could judge myself based on how fast I could do something or how heavy I could lift something. You know, it was no longer where I was too concerned with what I looked like, which was awesome because downstream I ended up looking the best I ever had, like, you know, most of you guys do. It wasn't until like after undergrad and stuff when I got into podiatry school and the demand was much crazier. Like I was actually competing and stuff in CrossFit too, just at like a local level. But still, even when you're competing like that, I feel like the demand for training is pretty high. You know, I was used to training 3 times a day, had to dial that way back. And so I got more into like powerlifting through like podiatry school and stuff. And then eventually I was just starting to be like, you know, like my joints really hurt and stuff. Let me do a little bit more bodybuilding now. And I gave myself a good run on the bodybuilding where I tried to bulk up pretty hard for a bit and just to see what it was like to kind of submerge myself in their lifestyle. And then I felt very unhealthy because it was basically like be as inactive as you possibly can for a while and then go do a workout and shovel a ton of food down your throat. And I got kind of sick of that. Like I went on a walk around the block and I was like, I feel like I'm dying. This isn't good. And so I've since like transitioned more into just overall longevity and being, you know, going into old age, which I'm not old, but when I do, you know, I just want to transition in as healthy as possible, just be well-rounded, have a little bit of cardio, a little bit of strength, and worry a lot more about longevity now.
You know, it's at our business, right? We started off very traditional CrossFit, and then have transitioned to our company, NC Fit. Our goal is to help people live freely and fully outside the gym. That's our goal. And it's evolved, right? You know, back in the day, it was about the sport of fitness. And now we're like, hey, let's get in some great strength. Let's get in some great conditioning. Let's do some accessory work and let's help people go keep up with their kids, go crush it for the rest of their
Yeah.
lives. Kind of similar journey to yourself. And I have to kind of pause and go back for a second because you kind of glanced over it. You said basically fitness saved my life and you had an eating disorder. So when you talk about like an eating disorder, I think what do you mean by that and how long did that impact you?
Yeah, so there's a spectrum of eating disorders, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. My fiance is actually a dietitian and works with eating disorders, so she would be a much better person to ask. But I'll
Yeah.
probably right. But there's a whole host of different ones. So there's things like anorexia nervosa. That's basically where they're just restricting calories and not eating enough. And then there's like bulimia, and that's more where they're eating the food and then they're getting rid of it in some way, be it throwing up or exercising too much or something. Then there's combinations of the two. There's things called like unspecified eating disorders, but it basically means that you have a very unhealthy relationship with food and your body image. And so mine was a little bit of mixture of the anorexia and the bulimia. And so I always felt like I just couldn't be lean enough. And I don't know why I felt that way. Like, I could see like all my abs, but when I looked in the mirror, I'm like, there's guys that look better than me that are leaner than me, And then I got so kind of obsessed with that it would become like when I ate, I'm like, I need to get rid of this food because that's going to make me fat. And it was so strange. I've never had like an addiction or anything other than that, where I literally felt like, I wasn't in control of myself, because I would go through these times of like binging and purging where, I'd be eating and be like, I felt like I was outside my body of being like, why are you doing this? Stop that. That's stupid. And I just keep doing it. And then I have to run to the bathroom and the same thing. I'm like, this is disgusting. Why are you doing this? Why? And it was crazy. There's a lot of really interesting neurological like science on that, which is really cool, which we don't have the time to dive into. And I'm probably not the person to even speak on it because I don't fully understand it myself, but it is a fascinating field.
Yeah, the whole like having a healthy relationship with food is like such an in-depth conversation. I feel like for your
Yeah.
fiance, what an amazing field to get into because I feel like especially now with the likes of social media and whatnot, maybe back in the day, you're at the gym, you're kind of pumping with some dudes, their abs look a little bit better, and you start seeing that. But
Yeah.
now it's like social media is like everybody's highlight reel all the time. There's
Yeah.
filters, there's all kinds of stuff. And I feel bad for these young adults or young children who are growing up because that is probably going to play an impact on them and I imagine on their food as well. And so how long did that kind of like concept of like, okay, I'm going to eat something, let's just say it's a cookie. Your body says, "Hey, I want to eat this cookie." But then your mind says, "Hey, you're disgusting for eating that cookie. I need to get rid of it ASAP." How long did that type of relationship with food last for? Or was that and then you found CrossFit or what was that?
Yeah. So it was like kind of present probably when I like turned, like 16, puberty, I wanted to look good for
Yeah.
girls and stuff. And so that's when it started kind of happening, but to a small extent where I would just kind of be like, that's a fatty meal. I'm not going to eat that. And I ran a lot and stuff and did crunches at night before going to bed, in my room when no one saw me. So I was just doing small things like that are a bit abnormal for like a teen to be even focusing on stuff like that. Maybe not now. Like you said, with social media, people are a lot more concerned with that. But then, I was even doing it in secret. I'm like, I don't want people to know that I'm not eating those fries, So that progressed for a while. And then I think it really kind of hit me like 18, 19, where I was kind of going through the thick of it. And then continued on until I was probably about right before like turning 20. And that's when I started working out. And that was really changed. I got this way healthier relationship with food. Like this food is going to fuel this workout and help me to build, not, and so that helped. But then again, looking at those aesthetic sports, it's all about basically let's obsess about the way we look. And so that CrossFit was very beneficial for me to be like, let's stop. Like, we're not even going to put mirrors in the gym. We're just going to talk about how well you perform. That helped a lot. And eventually I just kind of grew out of it all. And now I have a healthy mixture of everything where, I like to work out to look good and I like to eat to look good, but I also do it for performance and longevity and stuff too.
And did you go see like did anybody connect with you like meant like a sports therapist or anything like that to help you kind of like
No.
provide that insight or was it literally just like a mindset shift from looking good to then all of a sudden you found this sport that was about like, hey, like forget about how you look, let's talk about how you perform and that was what kind of like triggered it?
Yeah, it was more of that trigger of the finding of the sport. I actually never even told many people, like, if my parents listen to this, that might be the first time they ever heard of it, really. I never talked about that I had these issues. Like my fiance knows, maybe a few close friends, but I dealt with a lot of that on my own for sure.
Wow, that's cool to see like the impact that fitness, like, and in particular CrossFit, because it was so much so about like the performance, um,
Yeah.
was able to provide. Sometimes I think that we tracked too hard. We were too focused on performance, 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 where you would be okay with, poor movement and stuff like that. But on the flip side, it provides, you know, this opportunity where people are so focused on that they're not as focused on their body image, which I think is a benefit as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think both can have deleterious effects. And I think that, like everything, moderation is key. So, like you don't need to focus fully on performance. You don't need to focus fully on appearance. You can focus on a little bit of both, and you'll probably be able to be pretty healthy that way.
I love that. Now, talking about blood work, just to kind of start kind of wrapping up a conversation here, when someone's looking at their blood work and just from like a holistic health perspective, aside from like, Merrick has these like very vast blood panels, and most people probably just go for their regular blood panel. And I don't even know what that is, to be honest. Or CBC, is that like the normal one that people get?
Yeah, they get like a CBC and a CMP. That's just basically looking at the blood, and a small look into metabolic health, looking at things like electrolytes and stuff like that. That would be just a basic one that your doc would probably order for you. Maybe lipids if they thought you were at all at risk, like looking at cholesterol and stuff.
And if you're like a pretty healthy person, right, you exercise regularly, most people listen to this show, exercise regularly, they eat pretty healthy. They're in general people that I think are more on this side of fitness. What type of markers would they expect to potentially see that might actually not be bad, to your point, but might be bad on the paper, but actually aren't bad? Like you were talking about, I think my kidney function, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Or like you even brought up that my testosterone was like relatively low based on my background and stuff. I mean, anything that you think people could be aware of just when they're reviewing the blood work, and obviously they're going to have a doctor go over this, or hopefully they'll be going through Merrick Health, but things to consider if you are on this, you're not the norm, right? You're training hard, you're doing these type of things.
Yeah, there's quite a few things. So that's for sure the big one that we see is kidney health. That's something to definitely take into account, that when you're doing workouts and things and you have more muscle mass in general, your kidney markers are going to look a bit skewed, basically because these workouts, you are breaking down a small amount of muscle, that is the goal. And so that filters through, puts a little bit of strain acutely on the kidney, and can show up on the lab work. Same can happen for the liver. So sometimes we'll see elevated liver enzymes in somebody if they've just worked out. Also, a big one is the creatinine kinase, which is one that if you were to Google that, you would see it be like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. No, you probably just probably worked out too hard and you have too much protein in your blood. So those are some big ones kind of that we see with our athletes. So just a small recommendation that I usually give too is if you want to get a good look at your labs and kind of a baseline for athletes, I would try to remind people not to work out too hard for 3 to 4 days before if you want to get a really good look. So I just the other day I was going to get labs and I went to squat and I'm like down in the hole. I'm like, crap, I'm getting labs. So I put it back and went on the treadmill and just did some light cardio. So that would to offset that would be one thing.
And you're saying like a couple of days in advance. Okay. And then for women, my wife is getting blood work through you guys, and they have to wait till the 20th day after their cycle, and that's really important, huh?
Because with women, their hormones fluctuate so much more than us men because they have their cycles. And so if they just go get lab work on an arbitrary day, lab work at day 10 of their cycle versus day 21 is going to look completely different. And so we just to kind of set standards is get it at this day of your cycle so that we kind of know the fluctuation is due to that and not other issues.
Got it. And so if someone's listening, they want to, obviously in the show notes, we'll have links to Merrick Health with the different panels that I've done in particular. If someone wanted you to, is it possible for them to have you in particular review their blood work, or can you not choose at Merrick? It's just, there's a variety of MDs and they just kind of do what they got to do.
No, yeah, you can definitely do it. And then, I guess I can touch on the whole process at Merrick a bit more too, because I feel like
I love that.
We kind of just touched on the lab work, which is a part. It's just like I said, the TRT is a part. But honestly, if you go to the website, we don't really advertise like any medication. We don't advertise even really the blood work. It's just more optimization. A lot of that starts with the blood work, since we are like a telehealth company. So we do need to have some metric to examine on you. But to be honest, a lot of people come and they don't get any medication. Like, they're coming just for the optimization in general. We have a huge team of people, like 40 plus people. These are patient care coordinators, doctors. And with that, we have MDs, DOs, we have naturopathic doctors. We have a chiropractor as a patient care coordinator, a PA, NP, PhD, dietitian. We have tons of people. So we're looking to optimize you as a whole. So sometimes you come in and your lab work's fine, but that doesn't mean that we can't help you. So we're giving recommendations on your diet. We're giving recommendations on your sleep. We have people, I know you're a businessman yourself. We have executives coming in like, I just don't feel like I've got that edge at work anymore. I get this brain fog midday. I can't figure it out. We take a deep dive in that. It's a deep dive into your lab work to see, is there anything in your physiology causing that? If there is, we can address it through maybe diet recommendations only, maybe supplementations, maybe there's a medication that suits you. But I don't want to fall into that category of just TRT clinics where you basically are going just for the testosterone. Like, if there's an aspect of your life that you feel like can be improved, if you feel like there's any room for improvement whatsoever, if you're somebody who feels like they're at 99%, but they want to be 100 plus, like it's kind of always how I've wanted, I want that extra edge. Like, we're definitely the company to come to kind of get that. And then that's a wide spectrum. It's athletes like yourself. We have the bodybuilders who are abusing substances, who aren't, it's a pretty unhealthy sport, unfortunately, but we understand that. We have a lot of people like myself who have messed around with that kind of thing. We understand the harm reduction there. If you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we have patient care coordinators that do that and can specifically recommend, supplements that may aid in what you're doing. So, just wanted to kind of overall touch on all that too.
Yeah, no, hey, look, I get that. Like, if you're feeling like a brain fog midday, I found in particular, maybe trying like reducing the carbohydrates, fasting. There's other things than maybe just like
cold
you're saying.
Exposure, like I know you've been big into cold exposure and stuff. Like, we're talking to patients about this stuff, so it's cool because when you go to your primary, you bring up like, oh, I want to do this cold therapy, and they're like, cold exposure, like that's not really out. Like, can I write you a script, And I don't want to hate on the medical system as a whole, but I do feel like some people are kind of fed up with it, based on what we've been through with like the C word. I don't want to get you demonetized on here or something.
Oh, yeah.
A few years have been hard for people, and they kind of have a distrust, and they kind of want this outside look. Like, can you just not write me a script for something and kind of dive in a bit deeper as to me as an individual, And that's what we're trying to aim to do.
I love that. Yeah, the cold plunge has been really helpful for my family and I. And doctors wouldn't really talk about that, nor would that necessarily be in like a specific scope of them. But I think for you guys, you're trying to optimize across the board, and there's multiple factors.
The research on the deliberate cold exposure is insane. Like, it's amazing. I think most people should do it. I should do it. I don't. I should. Like, every day I'm like, I should make the shower cold at the end. I'm like, no, that sounds terrible.
Random fact, and I'll have to connect to the guys at Cold Plunge, but random fact, taking a cold shower for me is tougher than getting into the actual plunge itself. And so, so if you're able to kind of like get the to go underneath the cold shower, I find it to be significantly harder than actually just going in a plunge. I don't, for a variety of reasons, but just letting you know.
All right.
I love it, man. Well, dude, it sounds like, look, what Merrick is doing is awesome. I really appreciate the support that they've given us. And, kind of like helping our team, my wife, myself, I need to start getting the blood work done every 6 months, and it's starting from the last time I got it. So I'll do it again in a couple of months. And so if people want to kind of get more information, aside from the podcast show notes and find out more information about you or Merrick, where's the best place for people to go to kind of their next step? Should they go to social media? Should they go to the website? Where should they go?
They can just go to the website, the Merrick Health, and then they can sign up, and what's nice is you can do self-service labs where all you do is the lab work. If that's all you're interested in, you just want to look at labs and look at it yourself, that's awesome. We give you that power, which is hard to do too if you're just going to your doc, unfortunately. Or we give you the option where you're going to team up with we call it a patient care coordinator, which is basically, you can consider it like your concierge medical provider. They're non-licensed medical, like basically coaches, I guess you could say, where they're going to, kind of facilitate everything. They can give some recommendations, talk about things like cold plunge, give different supplementation, diet, exercise, lifestyle, sleep, all that kind of stuff, advice. If they feel like you need to actually speak with a doc, or if you're interested in speaking with a doc after you've gotten the labs and you say, like, I kind of want a medical opinion on this, or maybe I am now diabetic and I want to, is there any medication or anything that might be able to help with this? Or my testosterone's crushed and I have no libido, can you guys help me raise it? They'll set you up with a doc. And it's at that point, like maybe a guy comes in and they're one of your listeners, like, I do a lot of CrossFit and you guys have a doc who understands my needs. They can team you with it. And what's nice is we kind of have a full spectrum. We have powerlifters, strong men, bodybuilders, CrossFitters, kind of weirdos like myself who are, foot doctors who can help with your foot thing and also have dabbled in things. And, I'm kind of a little bit of everything. So yeah, we got a cool mix here for you, and we can definitely help you out to get that extra few percent.
Hey, I got to ask before we close out, I have the fattest, flattest foot on the planet, but I have to ask, what is your opinion on shoes versus more minimal or barefoot?
Yeah. So I like this discussion. It's interesting. It kind of falls right in line with everything we're doing. So basically,
we have a whole podcast just on that, by the way.
Good. Yeah. 100%. Like, so everything I learned basically in school is like, we need to give these people rigid support, rigid arch support, like, big clunky shoes, the heavy that are going to, everything, in a normal shoe wear, orthotics and things. But that doesn't really make sense to me from like a biological standpoint, we weren't born with shoes. It makes sense to me. Like, if I can strengthen the muscles in my feet in order to be able to withstand my body weight and function a little bit better, then I should. One thing though that I'll say is, like, the minimalist and barefoot isn't necessarily for everybody. There are some pathologies and things where some people have like rigid bony blocks that aren't going to be fixed by working out. Again, kind of falls down real quick to like that optimization thing where the problem that a lot of podiatrists have, and why we don't just say, oh, go train your feet, is because, these are people that we can't even get to walk for 10 minutes in a day. So you telling them to bust out the lacrosse ball and display their toes and do the toe spacers and, put like 2 hours of work into your feet a day, that's not going to happen. So it's a lot easier to throw them that crutch. Like, let me put a rigid orthotic in there and a big bulky shoe. But if you're into optimization and stuff, you're working out the rest of your body, you should probably not neglect your feet and let those be weak. I know you're good friends with like Kelly Starrett and stuff. He has good stuff, and all the strengthening the intrinsic muscles. So yeah, my thoughts are kind of all over on that, but it kind of falls in line with like the optimization versus just like a crutch.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it through that lens. Like, if you're a podiatrist and you're having a tough enough time getting your person just to walk 10 minutes a day, you talking about minimalist shoes is like 50 steps ahead of the way, like
hard. Yeah. It's easier just to be like, oh, take this big thing that's going to support your arch for you. I would love to tell them to be like, do the exercises, strengthen those arches, strengthen the muscles, but that's hard with people.
Yeah. Well, hey, we got to talk again about that particular subject. I think I know you're gonna be talking to Mark Bell soon. I know he's going on that tangent as well, and so am I. Frankly, I'm leaning more towards like kind of more of a minimalist barefoot, at least for sometimes.
Yeah, I'm barefoot right now. That's I've been working all morning from the office. Got the squat rack in the background, and we're barefoot. And yeah, I see the VP's wearing his minimalist shoes in here now. So yeah, we're all in too.
I love it, man. Well, bro, I really appreciate your time, your insight, your knowledge, your background. It's been really great to get to know you better. I'm looking forward to chatting again soon about, in particular, this conversation right here, away from the blood work and more for the foot, which I'm sure blood work plays a role. But man,
if you have a foot problem too, call up Merrick. We have helped people. I've looked at their x-rays and things, and we have other docs too, with pulmonologists and things, help with lung problems. We have a host of docs. Don't come to us thinking it's only about hormones. You got a problem and you want some medical insight on it, come our way.
Love it. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciate your time, Adam. I hope you have a great day, and we'll check in with you guys again soon.
All right. Take care, Jason.